Hello. Great to see everyone. Actually, I'm going to change my view so I can see everybody and not just me.
Good morning.
Good morning. Hello. Hi. Good evening. Afternoon, everyone.
Hello. Hi.
Uh, I'm solo today. I'm Pamela is
Good afternoon.
a little under the weather with allergies, and I'm also not feeling that great. So please I apologize in advance if I lose my train of thought all of a sudden. But I wanted to pick up something that from the years past when with Hootie, which we always started with a little pause before we started our meeting, and I feel like a little centering might be helpful today. So if you could just join me, and you can for just a moment of pause before we start this meeting. Thank you, everyone. Okay, thank you. Welcome again. This is the May monthly meeting, and this is part one of a two-part series, and we're calling it From Nairobi to Summit of the Future to Beijing +30, putting a spotlight on gender. And so Pamela and I were together in Nairobi on the 9th and 10th. There was a two-day civil society conference. It was, I believe, at 69th or so, if I got the number right. But that conference was being held for the first time in the African region. And I believe, there was quite a lot of excitement in that. The participation of those from the Africa region were at 70% at that conference. Was quite, was quite, those of you who are in this meeting and were attending, I'm sure you also feel the same excitement of the community and the grassroots activists really that were there in attendance at that meeting. And so today we wanted to talk about a little bit about what we did there, NGO CSW's participation. And that was that we were part of, there were two things. The first day, there were workshops, and we held a workshop together with several other partners. That was, and let me give you that name. It was the Road from the Summit of the Future to Beijing +30 and Beyond. Wow, it's similar to our meeting title today. So the Coalition for the UN We Need was part of that, GWL Voices, NGO CSW, UN Women, and the Women's Major Group. We together were participating in that workshop, and really the outcome of that was to really come up with some mobilization plans on what are we going to do towards Summit of the Future? How are we going to ensure that gender is reflected, mainstream throughout the whole pact, and how to advocate. And so we actually spent a bulk of that time in breakout groups. But I realized that I'm already talking about Nairobi, and we have something else on the program. EC members, you can always stop me and say, hey, Ivy, I think you're not on the right track. Because before we even get to Nairobi, I actually wanted to back up, because before we went to Nairobi, NGO CSW had a survey that we conducted. Many of you probably filled that survey out. It was in December and January. It was on the reform of the UN Commission on the Status of Women. So how do we want that changed? And actually that spurred us to our interest and commitment to the Civil Society Conference in Nairobi. The reason why NGO-CSW participated, really, we were wanting to ensure that the pact, which had actually a blurb, it was a very short sentence that says something about CSW revitalization, that was not going to be lost. And so that's actually the reasoning behind our participation. And we did put resources and time, and actually Joanne Sandler is going to be sharing the presentation on the survey results with you today. We actually had one multi-stakeholder presentation on the results at the beginning of May with member states. It was a multi-stakeholder, but we had several member states in the room. We held it at the UN in conference room. One of the numbers I cannot remember. However, there we gave a full, we had 90 minutes or so, a little less, to give a presentation and do a Q&A around the survey results. And Joanne's going to now share part of that presentation, and we will make everything available online as we always do. We will make sure that you get the full, the presentations, the slides you're gonna see, and we will have time for Q&A after Joanne's presentation. And I wanted to properly introduce Joanne, who actually now is with Women at Work. And she was our consultant in analyzing our survey. And she was with Femnet, oh my goodness.
Gender at Work.
I'm at Gender at Work. I'm getting all of everything jumbled in my head. But Joanne, please, if there's anything else you want to say about yourself to introduce you, please do. But we really appreciate you being here, really, and all of your hard work to put this together. And I also wanted to give a shout out to Rachel and Annabelle, who are co-coordinators, who also worked so hard to put together and analyze the over 600 or so results. And they had slides, and you'll see them, but they were also part of this. And so I cannot also send my appreciation on behalf of Pamela and I. We greatly appreciate all of you. So I'm gonna hand the floor over to Joanne now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ivy, and thanks to, first of all, warm greetings to everybody. It's so exciting to see such a huge group. Annabelle, can we have I don't know who's going to project the PowerPoint. Just to say it was a complete honor to work with NGO-CSW, with Ivy, Pamela, Huri, the whole executive committee, and the team that did an amazing job of putting this together. I want to go quickly. There's so much in this survey, but go quickly through the highlights so that you have so that we have maximum time to discuss at least the highlights. And just to say one quote in the survey that really stuck with me is that CSW is the best kept secret in the world. I agree, and I think we have a huge opportunity to bring millions more people into this secret in the coming year, as Ivy was saying. So could we go to the next slide? As Ivy said, it is in the Summit of the Future documentation that they call for revitalizing the CSW. So that is an invitation, and it's up to activists, stakeholders like us to seize this opportunity. Next slide, please. Yeah, you can go to the next one. So just to give everybody a minute to just sit with what is the mandate of the CSW. And it does have both a mandate to propose recommendations, so to look toward the future, and also a watching brief to monitor. And I think many people, the survey shows this, are questioning whether in these times CSW can actually fulfill that mandate without some revolution and reform. And that's what we want to talk about. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the survey, as it says, was to really seek opinions on how to transform the CSW. And it was sent to the sizable community that NGO-CSW has, hopefully forwarded from there, and 602 respondents replied. Next one. Next slide, please. Okay, so yeah, we wanted you to know a little bit about who took the survey. I think it's important to say that the survey, of course, could be more representative. It could have been in more languages. There could be more outreach. So I think we have to think of this survey as the beginning of a process and the beginning of shaping a message and really build on this. And so you will see that the regional representation is uneven. North America, Europe, and Africa make up the vast majority of the respondents. Latin America and the Caribbean, the MENA region, and Asia Pacific are very underrepresented. Next one. You will also see that the majority of respondents were over 50 years of age. Next slide. And sorry, I'm going through these quickly so that we have time to talk about this. Yes, that 62% of people had little or no experience with the Commission on the Status of Women. So that's also something to keep in mind. And next slide, please. And nearly 70% were NGOs, with another 30% being academics, independent experts, and students. So for you to just consider all of these factors about who responded as we take you through the findings. Next slide. Okay, you can go to the next one. So in broad terms, I think the survey offered important insights about what respondents thought about the effectiveness of CSW and also follow-up action or accountability, how to foster a more inclusive CSW and the desire for that, what kind of agenda the CSW needed to be relevant, and other items related to the functioning of the CSW. Next one, please. So as I went through the results, I would say for me, what I took away was there was an absolute clarion call for implementation and accountability, especially to make sure that outcome documents, resolutions, anything coming out of CSW, that it both emerged from consultations before CSW and were vigorously followed up, really to justify the enormous amount of energy that goes into just getting to CSW and the potential value. So it's critical in future brainstorming that we're really thinking about what does accountability mean? What does robust follow-up action that is relevant in every country in the world mean? That is what many people from all regions were calling for. Next slide. So there was, I think, overall, a very positive response on the value of CSW, with what we're calling a significant minority expressing some skepticism, particularly around the CSW making proposals that actually become implemented, that the monitoring can happen in a robust way, that it supports system-wide coordination throughout the UN, and that its overall mandate, as I said at the beginning, that its overall mandate is able to be fulfilled given the current structure, politics, et cetera, of the moment. Next one, please. For each kind of group of insights and observations, we tried to pull out recommendations. There were many, many more than we can show. Certainly there were recommendations that it's important to start work on CSW way before CSW, and that in fact it's a year-long ongoing process, that the UN and UN Women really need to do much more work on the ground to make sure there's input into preparations and follow-up afterward. And this one comment I thought was really interesting, the idea that there needs to be year-long activities. We are facing multiple crises in the world. We need to step up the urgency of CSW. And what if we thought about it more like the COP meetings and other UN processes that have a lot more urgency? Next one, please. Also, a lot of feedback on the importance of doubling down to end gender-based violence, that it should be a standing item on at all commissions of the status of women, there should be much more push behind observatories and around enforcement and data collection. Next one. In that vein, we asked and got a lot of feedback on what should be standing items at CSW. And there was a lot of interest in GBV, ending discriminatory laws, the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, and the Beijing Platform for Action. And just to say that if those items became standing items, that would mean a real difference in the way CSW was structured every year. Next one. So there were many ideas about how CSW could run more effectively, interest in the communications procedure, interactive dialogues, which happened to some extent. The idea that there needs to be much more coherence between the different mechanisms in the UN, like the human rights bodies, like CEDAW, like the special rapporteurs, et cetera, and they need to be much more, their documentation and their reports need to be much more integrated into the Commission on the Status of Women as a way of increasing accountability, is a really important one. And also that CSW should address specific country situations where discrimination is most intense. Next slide, please. More about the communications procedures. I think there was a feeling that this is a process that is underutilized, and with more attention, there could be much more reporting about abuses of rights and pushback against gender equality. That would be important for CSW to know. Next slide, please. And inclusion, a lot of comments about the importance, first of all, of creating an inclusive process so NGOs have more systematic input into deliberations. And also the use of modalities like hybrid and virtual sessions so that more people can participate without traveling to the venue. You can go to the next one. Right. And so the idea that it is incredibly important to make sure people know about CSW, know how to participate. You can go to the next slide. So the last two slides were really more about recommendations. First of all, about how to increase transparency, efficiency, and accessibility. The idea of holding the commission in different regions of the world to minimize limitations of getting into the US because of visa requirements, the importance of more languages and information, and then a lot of comments, of course, about the ECOSOC process and the importance of speeding up and also making it simpler to get accreditation from ECOSOC. And the last slide that I'm going to show at this point is really about, again, inclusiveness, making sure that those who are traditionally excluded have access, and when they get to CSW, have full access to all of it. I think if it's okay with Ivy and others coordinating this meeting, why don't we stop here? There are a couple more slides, but I think maybe to put the priority on giving people an opportunity for feedback. Ivy, what do you think?
That's fine. Yes, thank you, Joanne. So I see one hand raised by Gary Nisa.
Hi, yes, greetings. Apologies for not having my camera on. I'm in the car. Calling from Johannesburg as a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, one of the ECOSOC affiliated NGOs. I had a question around, there was another survey that went out around International Women's Day, and I believe it was initiated by one of the UN agencies. It is a survey that went out broadly, widely. I saw it on LinkedIn. So I just wanted to turn around and see, you know, this survey and the results are great. Obviously, it went out earlier, but I think that survey went broader and had better, like more representation. So the question is, does NGO CSW have access to that data? And is there a way that there can be triangulation of questions and results in order to inform a way forward? Thank you. Over to you.
Ivy, should we take comments and questions, a bunch of them, and then see what
Yeah.
happens,
Mhm.
including in the chat?
Yes, I'll keep an eye on the chat, and then we'll call Edwina and then Shayla after that, and then Joanne can comment. Is that okay?
Hi, my name is Edwina from Kenya, working with women and girls and running shelter that is a safe space for girls and women who are undergoing gender-based violence. I also see it in a technical working group that is at the national level. And mine is just a comment under the implementation and accountability of proposals made by CSW. The non-implementation, no advert, no action locally on violence against girls and women, because it also came up in many conversations when we are making, like at the moment we are making a national working plan on ending harmful practices against children, and that is mostly child marriage and female genital mutilation. And everyone in the room was agreeing that yes, there are so many NPAs that have been developed, so many documents, but the implementation is the issue. Thank you.
Good morning, good evening, greetings. I'm Shaila Rao Mistry, based in California, USA. I am CEO, founder of STEM Institute, Vice President of Advocacy for Graduate Women International, and Director of Advocacy for Women Graduates. And my question is this: I'm so happy that some of you were able to go to Nairobi. I very much wanted to go, but it did not work out. And thank you for the report. My question is this: we are agreed on many of the recommendations, and the main one being that the work should be throughout the year, and implementation throughout the year is the critical piece. Based on that, may I ask if any concrete decisions were made, or are there any plans in which way we can continue this work? Are we doing it through committees? Are we doing it through webinars? So, or is it too soon for that? But it seems like that is where the work forward will very much depend on. And then of the 3 or 4 item top issues that were mentioned, I hope leadership and inclusion of women at high levels was something that came up, and something that we give priority to, because a simple analogy is this: if we have a small pot of stew to share with the entire globe, it will not go very far. How do we then have a giant pot of stew for everybody to participate in, to share in? How do we enable that? And that's what women in high leadership will do for us. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. And others, you can please also put any questions in the chat as well. But do you want to address what has been asked so far, Joanne, or keep taking more questions?
You know, I don't think there's much to address at this point, other than to say, I mean, I think in the chat, there's a question. Most of the questions are for NGO CSW and you, Ivy. Can you speak to share coalitions? Yeah. I mean, I do think the sharing of the survey is important. I don't know about the survey that was on LinkedIn, so it would be interesting to know about that. I would just reiterate that this has to be an ongoing conversation. This is the beginning of a conversation. I think UN Women is deeply engaged as well in reflecting on, and I'm sure we'll be talking with partners about that. And to your point, the point about how can this become a year-long activity? What are the plans? I think survey respondents were very clear, and it makes sense that the UN on the ground, and UN Women in particular on the ground, needs to be supporting that, and NGO CSW needs to be strengthened so that it can also support that on an ongoing basis. In every single way, there's huge interest and excitement about making CSW what it needs to be, right? The preeminent space for both monitoring, accountability, and moving forward. And to do that, there needs to be a lot more investment in making sure that every country in the world has an active process of both generating proposals and also monitoring what kind of progress is taking place. So over to you, Ivy.
Yeah, so I also was not aware of this International Women's Day, this survey that went out. I'm not sure if anybody on this call has more information on which UN agency put that out. Would be curious as well. And yes, and also I have this question about from Jean in the chat. Will the survey and its outcomes be shared with how to reference it? I wasn't clear, but this we will share the outcomes of the survey. And as a follow-up, also the multi-stakeholder, the presentation that we did at the UN. There were, like I said, quite a few member states there that were so keen and very passionately, those of you who joined virtually also probably saw that, but very passionate about this topic on CSW and what to do. And I'm sure all of you have now, you have access to Rev 1, and CSW is still continuing to stay mentioned. Now it's pulled into the ECOSOC and strengthening it. I forget the exact language there, but we did reference the Rev 1 as well when we gave this concept note. So if there's any other clarifications, please continue to ask, but I see Lucy's hand up, and then we may have to stop the questions after that. Please take the floor, Lucy. Okay, I don't think Lucy can speak. So Sarah and Myra, and then that's it. Okay, Ghost.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. Oh,
Yes. First of all, I wanted just to congratulate the CWS because of the wonderful job that they did. I'm in Nairobi, that is in Kenya. I was so happy to see the co-chairs and to be together with them. They give us a hug, and that was something that I cannot be able to forget. And in order, because I don't think we have enough time to talk more about it, I'm so happy and proud to be among those women who are making this, who made this conference to be successful the way it was. I'm so proud of you girls, and I'm happy for CSW. And in fact, what I'm looking forward is to see more effectiveness and things going in line with the NGO organization. This is because what we have seen from you guys made us proud, and I don't have to add any other thing except to say thank you so much for coming to Nairobi.
thank you so much, Lucy. It was great to see you. So Sarah and Myra, if you have any questions regards the survey results, it'd be great too.
May I speak?
Yes, please.
My name is Myra Koveri. I'm the network facilitator of the International Network of Women with Disabilities. And I attended the ICPD conference in the Netherlands in 2013. I did not fill out the survey because too much was not accessible enough for me to deal with. I have a significant hearing loss. I have eye strain and other problems besides. So I apologize for not filling out the survey. I did post my opinions in the chat. I'm making myself available to be of assistance in any way that I can. I cut my teeth in disability rights activism as a moderator at my local independent living center in the town where I live in central New York State. And we had women in that meeting. It was on a health group, a women with disabilities health, a group to discuss healthcare issues. And there were women who stuttered. There were women who couldn't hear. There were women who were blind. There were women who were on oxygen. I've been to board meetings where someone was lying on a gurney with oxygen, and I moderated these meetings, and everybody understood each other. So I have some skills that I'm offering. I was also on the I was a representative of an organization called Mind Freedom International at the ad hoc committee on the negotiations on the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in New York. I've never been to Geneva. I attended some CEDAW meetings there in New York. I've never been to Geneva. And I am offering that I have a lot of skills and a lot of knowledge. And I'm also presenting, the International Network of Women with Disabilities wrote a paper on violence against women with disabilities that I edited. And it was a collective. I mean, I'm a feminist, okay? It's none of this is about me. It's about all of us. And my fantasy at the end of the negotiations on the CRPD, that's the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, was that the International Disability Caucus should be nominated for a Nobel Prize. And I'm not kidding. It was unbelievable what happened there. And there's no documentary, there's no documentation. There are a few of us who know what happened. People are dying left and right. Yuanwa San in Malaysia, I think is familiar to some of you from SCAP. She's retired and she's now living in Malaysia. She was in New York. She knows what happened there, and I know what happened there. And other people are reporting on things from there, but they're tooting their own horns. I'm not tooting my own horn, and neither is Yunhua. We are just getting the work done, and we are tag teaming now, working together along with.
Appreciate it, Myra.
I'm sorry. I'm done. Anyway,
Yes.
I want to help, and I know
we hear you, and I've noted, and we will definitely. I would love to hear how to make surveys also a lot more accessible. We were talking at the multi-stakeholder presentation with member states that that maybe we need to make different versions of it. Like maybe we need to do something that's more accessible on the phone, like shorter and maybe with more visuals and not as many words, or maybe get creative on how we also do surveys. So would love to even brainstorm how we can do this for future surveys. But thank you for offering your expertise.
I can quickly say it needs to be in plain language. There need to be verbal descriptions of every image that is displayed. Closed captions on Zoom are dreadful. We need a live transcription. We need international sign language at all the meetings, the international sign language interpretation. I'll shut up now, but I know what I'm talking about. You understand?
Right. And the committee would love to get more funding to be able to do all those things and have this multilingual capacity too, which we've heard over and over throughout the years. But we're going to have to close, and before we do, I want to try one. I mean, I don't know, Sarah couldn't speak earlier, but if it's short, you can.
Yes, it's very short. Sorry, I got disconnected. Hi, Joanne. Hi, Ivy. This is Sarah from the GMMP. Mine is a quick question. Given the survey results, I'm wondering how we understand or interpret or deal with these results in the light of what we saw in Nairobi, where most of the participants, quite a I would say comfortably maybe 70–80% of the participants are clearly unaware about the CSW. So, I mean, how do we deal with these results? What's a plan on how we move forward? Thank you.
Yes, our question exactly. Pamela and I had quite a lot of discussion around this. And that's what we're trying to do through all of these monthly meetings and the trainings that we have, the advocacy trainings. Again, we can get creative on how we present this material, videos. Anybody who has these talents who want to step up to do these things too, we are working with a very small staff, and they're pretty much volunteer based. But I wanted to give Joanne the last word before I move on to the program.
Oh, thank you so much, Ivy. I just wanted to say that, again, this is, I think, the beginning of the process, not the end, and bold ideas are needed. Of course, you know, people say, why are you even opening this in this complex political moment where things could deteriorate further? I think it's crucial to open it and to have this discussion about really how to revitalize CSW exactly as the Pact of the Future document says. And so I think NGO CSW, Ivy, this is right, you know, welcomes bold ideas. And the more we generate, the bigger a palette we have to start negotiating with. So hopefully this opens up the question. Many of you have had in-depth experience with CSW, and some of you have had more limited experience. And limited experience is great because you come with fresh eyes and fresh ideas about how change could happen. And so hopefully this is an invitation to continue the brainstorming. And thank you, Ivy. Thank you to the committee for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Joanne, again. And we will heed that call. The committee will, and we need all of your help to be bold together. And so I will move on to what many have started talking about or have been talking about, this Nairobi conference. Seems people are itching to speak about it. So we do have reflections, and I wanted to give the floor to first to Memory Kachamba, who's the Executive Director of FemNet, and she will give some reflections from participating in this conference in Nairobi. Thank you, Memory.
Thank you so much, Ivy. I hope you can hear me, and it's lovely to be on this platform. So I'll go straight into the reflections, and just to mention that, so these reflections have just really come out of mostly our network. We have not yet made like official reflections as a region, but it's just to note that you know, Nairobi, the Nairobi conference, we were part of the task team, the host task team in organizing, but also in also participating and in mobilizing for participation. So I just wanted to make that disclaimer. So I'll start with what worked well. So I think there was a sizable number of women's rights organizations, of course, not as many as we would have wanted. The representation also was not quite even, given the global distribution. But also it means that having more women's rights organizations engaging in the process doesn't mean that gender issues were all incorporated in all and across the board. But just seeing the participation, I think that's one observation that we made. The second one was also holding the conference for the first time in the Global South, also allowed for the global majority to attend. And I think there were about 70% of the total attendance were from the continent of Africa. I think the lowest attendance was from Asia, East and Central and South Asia. I think they're the least participants, but we had participants from all over. And I think this also, we thought this was also something which was great to know that the Nairobi Summit demonstrated that UN conferences and processes can actually be held in the Global South. And it also substantiates the campaign that we have been talking about in revitalizing the CSW processes of rotating some of these UN processes across the different regions. We also noted that having the women's major group, the stakeholder group meetings, was really a good space for collective understanding as well as positioning around the issues raised within the conference. I think we saw that for most of us, this was the first time we were participating in the UN Civil Society Conference. So it was great to share that intelligence and to have the Women's Major Group and also NGO-CSW and the Women's Rights Caucus also convening us in that space. So I think that really worked well. And I think it's great in terms of continuing with having women gender constituencies around such processes. I think another thing that really was a great success was the advocacy letter that was drafted, of course, by the Women's Major Group, endorsed by over 200 organizations nearly overnight. So kudos to everyone who mobilized and who made sure, they were, we had that letter out there. And so I won't mention the names, but I think it was really great collective action, but also the silent protest inside one of the feedback processes where we had, the Women Major Group members with the T-shirts saying, "This is not our pact, and the future is feminist." I think that was really great. And just want to shout out to Force Feminist and Akina Mama, who were making sure everyone had a T-shirt on that. So I think that was such a great success. It was also a good thing that the conference, to an extent, provided a space for the youth as speakers during some of the main and side sessions. It wasn't possibly to the extent that it would have been great to have that inclusive intergenerational interaction, but it also allowed for speakers to emphasize the role of young people, specifically young women in driving social change, and also the importance of intergenerational collaboration to sustain progress. So what are some of the things which were concerning? And I think most of the reflections are really centered around that the process, yes, we are talking about the summit of the future, but the whole engagement of civil society in the UN process, the information, it was almost like it's a purview of a few privileged, because most of these conferences usually happen in New York. And I think that was one of the biggest critique in terms of the time, the information, the budget, the financial support. Civil society is the least funded, yet they were also the least resources which were actually dedicated for this process. And we know that for most civil society organizations, with the shrinking space, it felt like this was maybe more like, just a by the way. And so that was really concerning. And also that the drafts that we're working on, there was already revision Ref 2, which we heard which came out, must be last week, which was already being worked on. So that trust to say what is coming out of the summit is really going to be included in the process. So there was that sense of tokenism, but of course, even most of our members, of course, when we're talking, it was to engage or not to engage. So it was a space to actually engage and learn from the process and to contribute in the different. So there's also a lot of, there was also issues around not having enough time to allow for pre-conferences to come up with collective positions. in the sense that, you know, even during the plenary, there wasn't enough time, you know, to be entirely interactive. I think the sessions, everything was happening a little bit fast, but that's also typical of most conferences as well. I think there's still a lot of questioning around the impact coalitions, their role and the positions they held towards key civil society concerns. For example, in one of the impact sessions on financing for development, one of the speakers mentioned some of the positions that women's rights organizations, we were discussing financing at the just ended CSW and the harmful of blended financing. But this was now being presented in one of the impact coalition as one of the solutions for development priorities to be pushed for the summit of the future. So we also noted some of that. And of course, maybe Sasha will speak a little bit more to that in terms of the, you know, the impact coalition on gender, and how we already have the Generation Equality Forum where we have invested quite a bit, which is very, you know, it covers almost all the areas and the impact areas that were being discussed in the Nairobi summit. So a lot of questioning around that as well. And also, I think also the summit featured discussions, I mean, while the summit featured discussions on gender equality, there was limited mention of the need to protect sexual reproductive health and rights, and issues also like, I think John was talking about the survey, you know, really ending violence against women and girls and gender-based violence. So we didn't hear a lot of that. And also in the draft Pact of the Future, we didn't see sexual reproductive health and rights and bodily autonomy and some of the basic human rights issues having a substantive, you know, coming out a lot in the text. So going forward, I think it's still important that feminist and women's rights organizations continue to mobilize towards advocating for the full inclusion in all aspects of the Summit of the Future, and really, really centering if this is the pact that is going to be discussed in September, where civil society won't be there, women's rights organizations might not be there. I think it's important to really push our member states. So also that disconnect in terms of the member states, some of our member states were not purview to the text or including inputs or opening up to include inputs coming from civil society. So the ask was also for UN to be providing that space when it comes to the national level. Otherwise, this just remains with the permanent missions in New York. So I think, yes, I think those are some of the reflections among many other, but yes, I hope other people who attended the summit will also be able to share their reflections in the chat box as well, so that at least we can have a holistic view. So thank you so much, Ivy. Back to you.
Thank you, Memory, for sharing that comprehensive reflection on the whole conference. And we will, we also enjoyed the caucus meetings in the mornings with you, and I will now hand it over to Sasha. Sasha Gabizon is Executive Director of WECF International.
Thank you very much. Ivy, can you hear me?
Very clear. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Sorry for the mix-up earlier, but very glad to be here. Hi, Memory. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I was very glad to be in Nairobi last week and with 2,000 other civil society organizations and also many member states, indeed, who were there, and especially members from civil society from Africa who were there, many young people also. And I'm glad we worked together well as feminists. We had a lot of strong feminist organizations there. And I think that is a good outcome of the Nairobi Civil Society Forum, because in the beginning we were indeed a bit worried because neither the text, which had been drafted by the member states, had a strong reflection on gender equality and women's rights, nor did we see much in the programming for the Civil Society Forum. So I think we can be proud of the mobilization. A great many thanks indeed also to Akina Mama Africa and FOS Feminista and Femnet and Women's Major Group and NGO-CSW for all working together. The action with the t-shirt which said, "This is not my pact, we need a feminist future," was essential. It was highlighted by the German co-chair who together with Namibia are in charge of getting the member states to agree to the text of the Summit of the Future. And she said that she would like also a more feminist text of the Summit of the Future. So that was good. We know that the Summit of the Future is being negotiated in very difficult times with geopolitical conflicts all over the world, and a lot of authoritarian regimes which are using, which are trying to portray gender equality as something, you know, the global South countries in particular are being imposed. And so I think an important message came also, especially from our African feminist colleagues, that this is, this is not our pact, and that we are all for gender equality and women's rights. And what is also very important, intersectionality. There were very strong voices from women with disability, the LGBTQI+ community, the community of people discriminated by work and descent. So I think also this intersectional feminist approach came out strongly from some of the meetings which were there. As Memory mentioned, we can be quite proud because the latest text which came out on the 14th of May, I think, after the conference, has now an action point 6, I believe, on gender equality, which was not there before. If you look at the language, it's still not a language we feel is progressive. It's still not even what we have in the SDG 5. It's quite old-fashioned language, not at all intersectional. I mean, it does now include also care work or care economy, but it does not reflect the broadness of the scope which we have in SDG 5 on including also unpaid care economy, etc. So I think there's still a lot of work to do on the negotiation text. I know that the Women's Major Group had already prepared their input before the deadline of the 15th of February. I think the aim is also to continue working with the Women's Major Group on giving that input, because there is a process for that. And then what we had in the workshops, which were co-organized by NGO-CSW and UN Women, is that we got, on the one hand, thematic priorities, which might not directly fit into the negotiation text, but we also got some ideas for actions and what could be a focus of some actions maybe in September or up to September, but without duplicating processes and work which is already happening under the Generation Equality Forum Action Coalitions. So there, indeed, I think there were some recommendations also from UN Women. Maybe we could link it to work which is being focused on already, such as the campaigns around having a female Secretary General or a female head of the PGA. So that could be a link, or maybe also work on, which I think you will be discussing after this topic, on the revitalization of the CSW. So some really interesting input. Then maybe I should just end with also the concerns about what has been launched as impact coalitions. And the feminist concerns was that it wasn't clear how they would be not duplicative of the action coalitions under the Generation Equality Forum, and how to make sure that they don't delegitimize, how do you say that? Existing spaces which feminists have already obtained in these UN processes, such as the Women's Major Group space. And I think, therefore, we are still very critical, and one of the recommendations was that these action coalitions should not be duplicative. They should be really with the human rights, intersectional women's rights language as principles, and you know, inclusive governance. And they should probably have a timeline by which they should end of September 2024, namely the Summit of the Future. So these were the discussions which were ongoing, and I think which will also need more discussions later on. And I'll be very happy to answer any questions or comments after any other speakers we still have here. Thank you, Ivy. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Sasha, for that. And yes, I hope we will have actually some time to address some questions. And I know the chat also, I don't know if you in memory and also Karen, you can look at the chat. I haven't looked at everything, but if there are any questions or comments that you wanted to reflect on, we'll have a few minutes before Lopa. But I'd like to turn it to Karen Lang, who is a member of Zonta International, to also share her reflections of attending the conference. Thank you, Karen.
Yes, thank you so much, Ivy. And thank you so much to Sandra, and as well to Memory, because you reflected it that well that I don't have so much to add. I'd like to, well, emphasize that to me, it was a really, truly gift to be able to be part of this experiment, as they called it. And it one thing that struck me was not only that for the first time, lots of NGOs and grassroots organizations from Africa could participate, which was a great gift for us, because it allowed a very interesting exchange, lots of learnings. But it was also so interesting to work intergenerationally at this conference. And I think this is really very important. And one of my great takeaways from this conference is concerning the structure and the organization of CSW, but not only CSW, that it's so important that we allow those organizations to be part of our discussions and to be part of developing all those recommendations. It's so highly important, and it was so meaningful what they contributed at the conference. And I was also very astonished about the unanimous sense and the solidarity at the conference. So we really thought on the inclusion of LGBTQI, of disabled, of marginalized groups, of the most vulnerable, and that was really something which was amazing. And I'd like to stress that also the huge NGOs or the NGOs from the North could learn that they can do something about it to include grassroots organizations and other NGOs. So if you are organized globally, like for instance, Zonta International or SOAR Optimist, there are ways to listen to each other and to include it and to think on possibilities to give others the opportunity to participate in discussions like this, besides the principle of letting CSW rotate, for instance, globally, so around the world, so that we can assure that. Yes, and in the light of what our ambassador said, Antje Lehendertze, she would love to have a feminist pact for the future. And there were others who also are really supportive, but she also said that it's really critical in these times, and that already there are already a lot of states who don't even participate in the summit of the future. So well, I'm aware of this, and I think we should all be aware of this, and collect our powers and get focused together, and take the energy of Nairobi to connect with each other more strongly in order to get our voices heard until the summit of the future. So that's, I think, what I wanted to stress from my part. I learned a wonderful word in, I think it was Kiswahili, and it was the nice word for solidarity, mshikamano. And I think this was the spirit of this amazing experiment. And yes, so I hope it is more than a call of action. It will remain more than a call of action. As Mishima Menda put it, it was the beacon of hope. And yes, so let's keep that in mind to push forward our goals. Thank you.
Karen, thank you for ending with that. I can't repeat the word. I tried to write it mshikamano. Oh, solidarity. I love that word. And thank you. We would like to invite Memory, Sasha, and Karen together to address any questions or comments from the floor. And I do notice some also in the chat. One question was about, someone said Rev 2, but we have a Rev 1 that's public. Is there a Rev 2 already out too? I'm just wondering about.
No, it's the Rev 1. No, we had the 0 draft first, so it's sort of for us the second version, but yeah, it's
Okay.
Rev 1.
Okay, good clarification there. And thank you for everyone putting the links in the chat for everyone to look at. So I'm gonna call from the floor, and then if you notice something else you want to make a comment on, the three of you can do that. But Sai and Dila, so if you can just make your
Ivy, thank you very much. And I think I would echo everything that is said from the Nairobi. Thank you very much. And I think to you and Pamela for giving us opportunities to participate both in the coalition and others. And so I had a great meeting with Sasha after the conference. I think the 3 points I want to reiterate here is, I think there is a call for us to work, because I was also at the Beijing Plus session. There is a call for us to work better with intergenerational feminists. And then we need to figure that out, what that means. And also there was a call for including all marginalized populations. I think there is already a comment made on intersectionality. I think even in our work, as we move forward with CSW NGOs, maybe at every point of time, we need to understand and then move the agenda of intersectionality forward and make sure all the marginalized populations are included. What amazed me at the meeting, and while talking to Pamela also, Ivy, at the end, is that even though many participants did not know about CSW, but their participation in Impact Coalition was amazing. And I think there's a lot of learning from there, and there's a lot of reflection. I think my one specific, because I work at the country level, I would say one small step towards making this, how do we implement it, is that maybe we should make these conversations happen on an ongoing basis at the regional and country level, number one. But with regard to monitoring, I would say if we are not part of the actions, if we only monitor, it will not happen. So again, we need to probably call for a meeting, and I'll be very happy to help on after the CSW happens, what can the NGOs, CSW NGOs can do in translating them into action and also helping with monitoring. I think I request a separate meeting for us to discuss in near future. Thank you very much for this, Shubha. This is Shubha from Sati.
Thank you, Sai. Okay, Dila, and then Violeta.
Okay. As my introduction, my name is Dila Royantina and I am from Indonesia. I just want to ask about how about opinion about the issue of gender equality has recently become widespread the mental health and emergencies that is occurring in Indonesia. It's very disturbing, and the frequency of criminal acts that are beyond reason has even shocked the world. Sexual harassment, acts of juvenile delinquency, and gangster, and etc. There are many examples of human rights violence in Indonesia, one of which is against children and widows. I just want to know about your opinion. Just it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that. Violeta.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the space. I already put my question in the chat, but I'm going to ask it here to see if maybe you can give us some guidance. I am a member of the Society of Gender Professionals, a colleague from the Secretariat, Aparna, she's also here. And we were discussing what opportunities are available to do some advocacy from us civil society organizations for the Summit of the Future. And especially because we noticed that the focal point for gender issues is here based with the NGO CSW. So we're curious about that, see how we can also collaborate. And yeah, that's my question. Thank you.
Yes, great. Thank you for that question. And yes, tangible action and advocacy. Yes, we would like that. Can we go back to the speakers if they have any comments, you know, on what they heard or what you've seen in the chat? And any one of you, I don't know.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I think for me, it's important to see how we can engage with the process going forward as we in the lead up to September, and to see how we can really make sure that our governments are engaged and we can still push our messages and even some of the key asks that we have. So I think once we can always, I think it would be great if we can have share most of our statements so that we are pushing where we see some of the red lines. And then if there are any member states which we might see as being progressive, then maybe we can also strategize in terms of how do we push them to push for language in that pact. Yeah, so I think for me, that's all I can say. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to support what Sai said fully. And in addition to what Memory said, I think how to engage, that can indeed, as Memory says, we can push for governments in country to really strengthen the gender language, which is there now. And that will, the problem is there we have, you know, a lot of pressure from groups like countries like Russia or Saudi Arabia to try and, take that language out. So we need a really strong alliance of friends of gender equality and intersectionality language. And yeah, that would be that's advocacy work. I think there is a lot of interest from not all of you seem to know the Women's Major Group, but that's an observer space we have for the Sustainable Development Goals process, and where we have a direct link to the UN in New York, especially also the Office of the President of the General Assembly, where the Summit of the Future is taking place, right? The General Assembly, September. So that we use those, those spaces, which are official spaces, which the feminists have to advocate for language, but we need to do that also in our countries. So there can be some key messages to share, which can be pushed with your governments. And then the other thing is, of course, to see, are there any other issues we feel are being left out completely, such as pushing for Madam Secretary General or so, which could be more highlighted in civil society campaigning, online, etc. So I think there's parallel activities which can take place. Some really focus more on the text of the Summit of the Future, which is going to be the Pact of the Future, where we can work together very closely with the Women's Major Group, and some where we can maybe do online campaigning or so, where we also need to advance, but which might not come at all into the text of the Pact for the Future. So I think those two things can go in parallel.
Yes, and well, I would also like to add that it's I think it's important that we also stress this with our media, with communications. It would be wonderful to have something like a press kit to share, and also to adapt to national needs, just to draw the attention of the media to this things. Yeah, it would be fine. And it would also be fine to have an overview of all the results of the impact coalitions available for anybody publicly. I don't know if this is already planned. I understood that they will publish that, but I'm not sure how this and when this will be available.
Yes. I think that, when John was sharing about the survey results, she was saying that some of the respondents were mentioning COP and how, most people like we talked to out in the public would reference or would understand that the climate crisis and what's being done by the UN. But when we talk about gender equality, we talk about CSW, and then it becomes like, they don't even know. And actually, even somebody had commented in Nairobi that a lot of the conference participants, like the majority, like more than half, didn't know what CSW was or ICPD was. So there's definitely a lot of awareness raising we need to do on our end, those of you. And we had asked a question when you registered to this meeting, how many of you are joining the monthly meeting for the first time? And we can say based on the last 5 years, it's always about 20% of those registered who are coming in for the first time, which is a huge, it's a very high number, I believe, for people to, so somehow the reach is continuing to spread. And I wanted to mention that Memory also, serves within NGO CSW's Africa region. We have NGO CSWs in the regions as well, and we hope to collaborate, with the Women's Major Group, of course, and I think any way we can to strengthen the regions. Of course, one level of advocacy and another of this awareness raising and really creating a movement and excitement from the ground up, so that media will pay attention, for example, so that member states will pay more attention. Yeah, and so we actually, I'm sorry, but we've run out of time, and I need to pass the floor to our next speaker. But I really appreciate the reflections from Sasha and Karen and Memory. And we hope you can stay on for the next section as well. It's the road to Summit of the Future, and Lopa Banerjee is here, the director of the Civil Society Division at UN Women, and I will pass the floor to her. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ivy. I hope you can all hear me. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Just a minute.
Yes.
Okay, great. Actually, I was able to listen in to this conversation. I was able to listen in to this from the top of the meeting, and I'm glad that I did. So let me actually start by sharing a few thoughts on some of the discussions that you already had. So let's start with CSW. And of course, this also leads into the road to the Summit of the Future and the advocacy towards the Summit of the Future. So as I think Sasha mentioned, Rev 1, which is the revision after the zero draft, was presented last week by member states, and there are some gains in this Rev 1 draft. Where it currently is at right now is that the third reading of this Rev 1 will begin on the 30th May, and it will continue through June up to the 3rd of July, during which time there is the opportunity to make inputs by civil society and others, and I'll come to that in a moment. But there are some gains in this. Notably, let's start with CSW. As you all knew or know, in the zero draft, there was in Chapter 5, which is on reforming global governance, there was, or transforming global governance, there already was language around the revitalizing of CSW. Not only has that language been retained, so there is a very clear proposal in this Rev 1 on revitalizing the Commission on the Status of Women for it to be to achieve gender equality, the empowerment and human rights of all women and girls. But it has gone beyond that to make a very clear ask. It says, request the Secretary General to provide recommendations for the consideration of the ECOSOC on how to ensure that the modalities, functions, and working methods and procedures of the Commission are fit for the future. So this is new language that has come into Rev 1, requesting the SG to provide recommendations. This is a big gain, because this means that the SG will now have to provide recommendations, and this means that there will be a process now to seek support for the revitalization of CSW, and UN Women will be engaged in this. And of course, we will work extensively with civil society and women's rights groups youth in order to be able to provide these recommendations to the SG so that because he will have to respond to member states now with a set of recommendations for this revitalization of the CSW. So this is a good gain, a very strong gain from in Rev 1 going forward, and that can be one of the main sort of focuses also in terms of the advocacy efforts leading to the Summit of the Future, so that not only is this language retained as we get into the next version, as we go beyond Rev 1 and get into the final draft. Not only is this language retained, but there is even more weight and more specificity to this recommendation going forward on that. A couple of other things that are gains in this Rev 1, and we do believe that while the participation of civil society and in particular women's rights groups was not as robust as it could have been for this. The fact that there was so much of mobilizing by women's rights groups around this and civil society around this, I think has also resulted in some of these gains. So now in chapter 1, which was not there in so much strength earlier, there is language on comprehensive sexual and reproductive health and rights. There is language on that. There is new language that has come in chapter 2 on peace and security, on including multiple references to conflict-related sexual violence, and in terms of concrete steps to eliminate the full range of threats and human rights violations and abuses experienced by all women and girls in conflict settings. This is also a stronger language than was there in the zero draft on this. Others have already mentioned the inclusion of care work and so on. So there is also reference to SRHR in the chapter on future generations, and in terms of removing barriers for meaningful and equal participation. So there are some opening points in Rev 1 and in the discussions that will go forward, which will allow for some very focused advocacy going forward. I want to also speak to a couple of reflections from the Nairobi conference before I go into the advocacy efforts, because I think it's related. I think what was, as UN Women, we were participants at the Nairobi conference. UN Women was not an organizer of the conference at all. Like civil society organizations that are in this call, we were participants, and we were very grateful to join forces with the Women's Major Group, with the Women's Rights Caucus, with NGO CSW, with a number of other women's rights and civil society organizations, and some of the discussions that took place in Nairobi, including the workshop on Beijing +30. And I think it was, colleagues have already mentioned, and I think it was very clear that the focus in Nairobi that was brought by so much of the women's rights mobilizing that took place in Nairobi by the groups that were there, in terms of the discussion on strengthening accountability and recommitment of duty bearers to the normative standards. That discussion was so strong in Nairobi, and that was a really important discussion in terms of, and of course, the letter that was mobilized that focused on avoiding duplication, the call to avoid duplication, the call to strengthen existing processes, the call for the UN in particular, and also those that organize the conference, including the civil society organizers of the conference, to be more mindful in terms of not duplicating efforts and strengthening existing processes. I think that was a very strong call. Now, on the 30th of May, the conference the civil society co-organizers of the conference on the 30th of May will present the outcome of the civil society conference, and they will also present what of the impact coalitions, which ones will remain. They intend to present a one-pager on all of the impact coalitions that will stay. What impact coalitions are these? What will be their objectives? How will they be carried through? So we will wait to hear from the conference co-organizers around these impact coalitions. We share, as UN Women, we also received from civil society and women's rights organizations the letter. As all of you, as I have mentioned, UN Women was not engaged in the development of the impact coalitions, nor at this point in time have we joined any of the impact coalitions. What we have asked for, and the conference organizers and those that are leading the discussions on the impact coalitions from civil society, what we have asked for is a briefing from the co-organizers of the impact coalitions to the constituency of generation equality and the action coalitions that UN Women convenes, so as to be able to understand where the impact coalitions are and also to see how to avoid duplication and so on. In terms of the next steps, and what are the opportunities for the advocacy going forward. Right now, the Rev 1 is, member states are reviewing Rev 1. Deliberations will begin on the 30th of May. There will be a town hall that will be hosted by the co-facilitators, that is Namibia and Germany, on the 30th of May. And this will be in New York, but it will also be online and hybrid. And the co-chairs, together with the UN Civil Society Conference co-chairs, they will brief member states on the outcome of the Nairobi conference. And therefore what aspects from the Nairobi conference will go forward, including in terms of the impact coalitions. In terms of the advocacy moments, at this point in time, the advocacy and the negotiations are all happening in New York. Right now, and for the Pact of the Future at country level, there isn't a countries at country level haven't set up their own processes in country for influencing the Pact for the Future. And so negotiations are currently in New York, and this is a challenge. However, what is in place at country level right now is the lead up to Beijing +30. So at country level, around Beijing +30, national processes are on. Now, there is, of course, a complete alignment between Beijing +30, the SDGs, and the Summit of the Future, Pact for the Future, and beyond. So the processes that are in place in countries for Beijing +30 now are also an opportunity to be able to use those processes to be able to lobby national governments, for civil society at the country level, to be able to use those Beijing +30 processes also to lobby for a more progressive Pact for the Future going forward. In addition, there are a set of action days that are leading into the Summit of the Future, and these action days have now been announced. If you have not seen it, I'm happy to share this with you. There are different UN organizations that are leading these action days that will take place alongside the Summit of the Future in September. And these are action days. There's going to be an action day on digital futures, an action day on youth. There will be an action day on peaceful futures and collective action, and on sustainable futures for all. There are different UN agencies that are part of this, including UNDP, the Department of Political Affairs, the UN Youth Envoy's Office, etc. And those are also going to be multi-stakeholder and civil society influenced processes. So it would be good if you were to reach out to the focal points that have already been identified by the Secretary General's office around these action days, because those will be also opportunities to look at in terms of going forward. So there is the Pact for the Future and the engagement and the ability to strengthen the Pact for the Future language. But as others have already identified before me, there are, that's a negotiated text. And so there is a limit to what it will and will not be able to reflect ultimately. But the Summit of the Future itself, the session of the Summit of the Future itself is an opportunity for a greater degree of mobilizing, because there will be a number of different stakeholders, including states, that will be there. So to think of using from now to the Summit of the Future as a roadmap to influence the Pact for the Future through the organizations, through the platforms that will be provided now for civil society engagement, but beyond that, to also think of the Summit of the Future as itself as a moment, and then to, given the fact that there will now be a process for CSW revitalization, to be able to work towards that, because from a UN Women perspective, and as we lead into Beijing +30, and we look at the Beijing +30 discussions as contributing to and going, lifting off from the Summit of the Future, the fact that CSW is the largest space where civil society and stakeholders self-organize and self-mobilize for the most significant discussions on equality, rights, and empowerment. This aspect of it, of CSW, and the fact that now there is the opportunity to strengthen that through the Pact for the Future as a longer term thing, offers us an opportunity and a roadmap really for going forward beyond, from the Summit of the Future into Beijing +30, and actually into the post-2030 agenda itself. So it's a full roadmap ahead from now on. I'm going to stop here and turn it back to you, Ivy.
Thank you, Lopa, so much for all of that. And again, you have such a way of like really clearly articulating and getting everyone on the same page about where we are specifically with this pact at this time, and getting to the Summit of the Future. I'm sure everyone's going to be asking about the action days. So if there is a link or a document that we could share, NGO CSW can distribute it, or it could be just put in the chat. We will include all of these, the recording of the meeting and notes as well, and any references. But all right, do you have time for maybe a few comments or questions from the floor? Okay, so if there's anyone who would like to take the floor and have a comment or question for Lopa. Yes. I'm going to first, Shaila, because you had spoken before, I'm just gonna go to those who haven't spoken. Okay, so Rosa.
Thank you, Ivy. Thank you so much, Lopa. A ton of very important information. I'm going to quickly just jump into my question, and it is to say, where is the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development within this thinking? Because, you know, with the Women's Working Group on FFG, this is one of our main thrusts. And so I would like for you to speak on that. We see it as part of the roadmap leading into and through the Summit of the Future and Beijing +30, and then into the conference that's happening at the end of June and beginning of July of next year. So thank you very much. I know we're going over, so I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Ivy.
Thank you, Rosa. So Maria, and then after that, Jose. And if you can introduce yourself, sorry, I didn't mention that earlier. If you can state your organization, yes.
Yeah, hi, I'm Maria from Brazil, and I'm working with indigenous peoples with S, no, because that is the form UN use. And I'm working mainly with women, health, and climate change, and girls, and indigenous, of course, and the vulnerable people. What's mean vulnerable peoples with health, neglect, disease, neglect, illness, as a lepra, as a leishmaniasis, and so on. I'm a medical anthropologist and working with them since 1999. Hello, Evie, how are you? Fine, dear? Hi, and I would like to ask if you can give Lopa, give to us steps and to study this document. Sorry. And because you gave us these steps. In this one, you have that. And the other one, I would like if you can do a resume for that steps to work on the main issues. Do you understand me?
I'm sorry, no, I didn't quite get what you're asking for. Sorry about that.
Because you have because I'm working with the discourse narrative, no? Analysis of discourse. And you gave the sentences and you gave the key concepts you work with.
Are you referring to what I was quoting?
Yes, yes, the document.
That the Pact for the Future is available online. It's available online. I was reading the Pact for the Future.
But you have the key concepts. If you wanted to question the other things, and if you wanted to go on and criticize and put political means inside of the next steps, you need to know which one the key symbols or key concepts we must work with. Do you understand me? And I would like if you can elect the key symbols to work with, because we can make and we can build together some critical or give a step on this document. Do you understand me?
I can come back when I think I get what you're saying, but I'll come back when I come back with my comments.
Yes, if you want, of course, because I think I can elect this and make the new documents between many codes. Do you understand me? With the criticize which concept. But I think you work inside of this, and it will be much easier if you do that and we work together with these concepts. It's a discourse analysis. It's very good one to go forward. I don't know. That is the way I'm working with. Just a suggestion. Thank you so much, Lopa.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. So Jose and Graciela, and then I'll turn it back to Lopa.
Thank you for that. Hi, everyone. My name is Jose Campi Portalupi. I'm originally from Ecuador, but I work as Director of Communications and Advocacy for Equimundo. At Equimundo, we work with masculinities and we promote engagement of men and boys for gender equality. One of the things that this is the first time that I joined in one of these calls. We weren't able to be there with you in Nairobi, but there's a great sense of appreciation for being able to be part of this conversation. I would just love to understand better how we can contribute to this task. I think that we would love to be able to influence a bit more of that final language. We would love to be able to pool all our resources for narrative shift and for media and advocacy to raise the profile specifically of paid and unpaid care within this document. Like doing a first search, there's only just one mention of the word care within this text. And we think that it is crucial to talk more about it, as one of the main pillars of the work that we do has to do with equity of care around the world. So I would just, because we are newish to this conversation, I would love to understand maybe some initial steps of how we could be of help and service to you and to this final document and the work that we want to achieve.
Welcome, Jose. So, Graciela.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Graciela Soto. I'm from Peru, but I live in New York, and that's where I'm based. I'm part of called an ECOSOC, which is a consultative study with the UN called the GRAIL, but it's also part of the working group of girls. So I remember from listening to Ivy Coig and Pamela Morgan discussion on gender equality in Nairobi, was that last week? They talk about the 3 top recommendations that should bring forward to the member states: gender violence, leadership for women, and one of them was investment on girls. So my question is, I know that the working group of girls already has submitted their recommendations to the member states in the civil society consultation. My question is, given that there is a time frame in which they will still can address the member states during the revision, how can we get the girls more engaged because if we need to invest on in the young women and girls for the future, what are the ways that they can become more engaged and advocate for the Summit on the Future and Beijing 30?
Shall I go ahead, Ivy?
Yes, please.
So I'll come to your question, Rosa, because I think I have a specific response to that, whereas I don't have such specific response to the others. I think the others have similar questions around how can civil society engage. So friends, this was one of the key issues that was raised by all the major groups, including the women's major group and the various caucuses in Nairobi, that, for the SDGs, there was the whole process that was in place for CSOs to engage through the major group processes, which is not there at this time for the Pact for the Future. So right now, the Pact for the Future is how the co-facilitators are convening civil society in different spaces. So one of the first spaces to discuss Rev 1 is going to be on the 30th of May. Now, I would ask all of the civil society organizations, all of you, Equimundo and everyone else, to actually join that meeting on the 30th of May, which will be the town hall that the co-facilitators will host, and to ask what are the systems, what are the next processes that the co-facilitators are putting in place for the next level of engagement with civil society to discuss to input into the draft. They may do what they did earlier, which is they may have a set of town halls, they may ask for written inputs, which this is what they did for the zero draft. And so now for Rev 1, what are the modalities that they will put in place? As those of you who are there in Nairobi heard, the co-facilitators themselves, the two co-facilitators, that is Germany and Namibia, are committed to having civil society inputs and would like to have more robust engagement. However, that is not the case with several of the other member states who are negotiating. So this is why they are also struggling with how to make sure that the civil society inputs are channeled. And so based on what currently exists through the major groups and through the processes that exist, the Coalition for the UN We Need, the Women's Rights Caucus, all of this, these are the ways in which right now you can channel inputs. And I would ask also that on the 30th of May at that town hall to ask for concretely what processes may be in place going forward. That said, from where UN Women sits and where UN Women has some authority and leadership is within the Beijing +30 process at country level, including what we will set in place globally and regionally. And there are regional consultations that are also taking place right now for Beijing. Those will actually be spaces for very similar inputs to also go in. They may not inform directly the Pact for the Future. So for the Pact for the Future language, you will need to hear and table your thoughts and ask for on the 30th of May at that town hall, and to see what next comes through. And then, of course, for those that have the ability to influence the member state discussions that are taking place in New York, because they will take place through the month of June in New York, and so to be influenced to influence that. I think the point around I think that what was being mentioned around the thematic and the discourse and so on. I think where the issue there is right now, as far as the Pact for the Future is concerned, there are 5 chapters. The inputs that are going to come in will have to be on those 5 chapters. And so whatever in terms of the discourse, the language that exists in terms of strengthening that, noting that there is a very clear call to keep the language and the Pact for the Future, the document, concise. So that's as far as that is concerned. That said, the objective is that there is a roadmap from the Summit of the Future and beyond, through Beijing +30, through the FFD conference and beyond into the post-2030 agenda. So that aspect around looking at the different aspects around a comprehensive women's rights and gender equality agenda, including through Beijing +30 into the post-2030 exists in terms of how that framing can happen. To your point, Rosa, very clearly, absolutely. This is there is, as you know, the discussions around financing are weaker in the Pact for the Future document, as you well know, and even in Rev 1, there hasn't been that level of strengthening around that. Therefore, the Summit of the Future itself, not necessarily only the pact, but the convening of the Summit of the Future is an opportunity. The aspect around financing is going to be resourcing is a key aspect around the accountability discussions for Beijing +30 and into the FFD discussions and beyond. So the roadmap that you were talking about, absolutely. The criticality of continuing the discussion around financial architecture reform and a higher level of gender responsive financing, including financing movements, it remains a centerpiece for Beijing, remains a centerpiece for the post-2030 agenda, and will be a centerpiece actually for the women's leadership discussions that will take place around the Summit of the Future convening. Over.
Great. So I think the big question is, was around advocacy. I wanted to just mention something about that because NGO CSW, as the convener of civil society for CSW specifically, that was our mandate. And, we have an advocacy toolkit that we try to promote and share as widely as possible because it takes all of us to do this. No one's going to tell us, what specifically to advocate for. I mean, we all represent constituencies, organizations that have certain agendas, and we come into this UN space to advance, right, the human rights of women and girls. And there are, Sasha mentioned that there are statements out there. There are very many organizations have put together statements, their thoughts, reflections around like Rev 1 or even the Zero Draft, if that's useful to you to look at as a reference on what's being asked. But it is an intergovernmental space. And at this point, I mean, it's a very closed space, as we know, the summit of this pact process, which means that we're going to have to go into our own personal connections, which means, what member states do you know, what national, governments, who can you talk to that's actually going to be in the negotiation space that can influence, or that's what we need if you're speaking of advocacy. I think in a nutshell, and in a more that's how I see our engagement if you're talking about language, because I don't think that there's that much room to make that document, like Lopa said, they're trying to keep it concise. So they're not gonna all of a sudden open up for so much new, many new like language and all that. So, and the other piece that came to mind, about that impact coalitions. And I think one takeaway for me when I went to the civil society conference, and I know that we have some planning committee members joining in this call as well. But I think the positives of it is that DGC and the conference, the committee planning group really tried to make it as inclusive as possible. And we know that we don't all agree on every issue, but to have that space to be able to convene together and to form coalitions definitely it's a unique space, and there's value to it. Is it easy? No, but we also know member states don't think in unison either. And so just wanted to put the call out that, as much as possible, you know, feminists, women's movements, all of us together on this call, if we can, you know, join hands to really somehow, you know, really influence, you know, this pact, and also take our own local actions forward, and really have our eyes on Beijing +30 and beyond, and let's push forward even more. But I know there's one hand up. Christine, I'm wondering, do you have a question to Lopa specifically on what she mentioned? I do want to give space before we close. And Lopa, I want you to have actually reflect at the end.
Thank you very much. Let me put my foot over there. Thank you very much. I'm from Nairobi, and I represented the Medical Women International Association. Our concern around, I think, has been spelled out that the weaken the process, the reproductive health and rights section. We would like to see how to strengthen that, but I think Lopa has already said how then that could work within the coalition if possible, and also the spaces that are already available. So I think my major question has been answered. However, I would like to say that the conversations around the Beijing platform plus Beijing +30 conversation is really not visible in the region very much, maybe in selected countries. But from where I sit, and I'm widely in connection because having been the vice president for the region near Eastern Africa, I guess that conversation is not very loud. And during this conference, the CSO conference, the disconnect between those that were in Beijing, like myself as a youth, and the current people, we need to package information well so that the intergenerational issue, so that information goes across intergenerationally. I wouldn't want to waste a lot of time here, but if opportunity presents itself, we would be able to do the writing on that as well. And also the care work. We've done a lot of care work and also gender-based violence. So we would like to put that out as maybe a resource that could be tapped in if writing is to be done by any group here. Thank you very much. And thanks for giving me the opportunity.
We only have 3 minutes, and I did want to give Christine the floor because she had her hand up for quite a while. I know Yaira used to just open, yeah, if it's a very quick comment, but I wanted Lopa to address that, what was just said too. Yeah, did you want to say something, Yaira? Very quick, like in 30 seconds, or maybe your internet connection.
Okay, so hi, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you. I think you're frozen now. Oh yes, now
Yes.
you're back.
Okay, so I'm Yaira from Ghana. I wanted to ask Christine.
Maybe because your connection's in and out. Maybe you and Christine can connect on the chat together.
It's in and okay, sure. Yes, I'll do that then. Because I was going to ask, I was going to ask about something similar to what Christine said, but I think you will answer that, and then we'll get the information from there, so we can let them understand or talk to them about the 2030 Belgium conference. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. In terms of my one comment would be just in terms of everything that we're hearing about the inputs into the Pact for the Future, to actually really attend the 30th May meeting in full force, and really seek from the both, because there will be a number of member states. The co-facilitators will convene the town hall, but of course it is a briefing to member states and it's a discussion with member states. So to be able to really table and ask for a very clear direction on how civil society inputs can be received by the co-facilitators to inform the discussions on Rev 1 and the next level of negotiations. But that's one. The other would be, as much as possible, again, the same principles that civil society raised around, sort of corralling work and being cohesive, to be able to channel inputs through mechanisms, so that through either the major groups mechanism or the Coalition for the or the Women's Rights Caucus, or the various groupings that already exist, to be able to channel inputs through that. I think that will make it easier for the co-facilitators to receive inputs and to be able to reflect them in the negotiations that they lead for the Pact for the Future. I think we are fortunate that the co-facilitators are very open in terms of the engagement with civil society. So as much as they can be supported by the bilateral discussions that you can have with other member states in the discussions to support that would be good. So that's as far as one track. The second track around the alignment of Beijing +30 together with CSW, together with the Summit of the Future. I hear you in terms of the fact that actually there are some discussions already going on certainly in Kenya and in some of the regions. The mandate right now for all countries that are signatories to the Platform for Action, they are all required to report back. And all of the regional commissions will be convening a set of discussions. Now, of course, not all of the countries are hosting consultative processes for Beijing +30, even though they will report on it. That's where UN Women will be working now also going forward, including some of this work has already started in regions and countries, and this will now accelerate. So from a UN Women perspective, we are certainly committed to being able to host these consultations that will take place at the regional and country level, to be able to align Beijing +30 together with the work now that will happen around CSW revitalization, and then into through next year and beyond into the post 2030 agenda. So we would certainly seek to align as much as possible from now into the summit and beyond. So with that, let me stop here, and we would be very grateful to receive all of your inputs. And you will also hear from us as we set up some of these consultations. In some of your regions and countries, consultations are already happening. But in the others, we will be reaching out to you, and we are open to receiving all inputs and suggestions, including the presentation that Joanne shared, which we will actually share more widely now, including within UN Women and with the member states.
Thank you so much, Lopa, for everything that you shared and all the time you spent with us, and for everybody here that's present. We will now close the meeting in just a few minutes to go past the hour. If you'd like to open your mics and say goodbye, and have a nice rest of your day or evening.
Thank you, Lopa. Always good to see you.
Bye. Thank
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Lopa.
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Annabelle
Lopa.
and Rachel.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, Lopa. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
What is the
Bye.
date of the
Adios.
action about?
Bye.
What is
Take
the
Bye.
date about
care.
the action of
Bye.
people?
Long.
When is it?
Bye-bye.
Bye.